Let me tell you something strange about group chats in this age. They never really sleep. One notification turns into five. Five turns into 50. Memes, voice notes, inside jokes that you're somehow expected to understand in real time. Plans being made, plans being canceled. Someone drops a screenshot. Someone reacts with 5 laughing emojis like it's their job. And the messages just stack faster than you can breathe. And in the middle of all that noise, there's always that one person, you know the one. Their name pops up under the message. Seen. They're there. They're watching. They're present. But they never say a word. No lull. No, I'm down. No, sorry, I'm late. Nothing. Just silence. And what do people usually decide about that person? They're awkward. They don't care. They're antisocial. They think they're too cool. They're ignoring us. They're weird. But here's the part that doesn't add up. If they didn't care, why are they always there? If they were truly disconnected, why do they always know what happened? They'll show up to the plan like they read the entire thread. They'll reference a joke from 3 days ago. They'll remember details you forgot you even typed. They're not absent. They're just invisible. So why would someone choose that? Why would someone stay present without participating? In a world where participation is basically automatic. Because replying is easy, right? It takes 2 seconds. A thumbs up. A laughing face. A single word. Something, anything. And yet, they don't. And the truth is, this kind of silence usually isn't emptiness. It's not a lack. It's something else. Something intentional. Something protective. And once you understand what's really happening behind that scene and that missing reply, you stop judging it as distance. You start seeing it as a choice. And maybe, if we're being honest, you'll realize you've done it too. And once you understand what's really happening behind that scene and that missing reply, you stop judging it as distance. Because silence in a group chat isn't always someone drifting away. A lot of the time, it's someone choosing where their energy goes. We've been taught to think that connection means constant output, constant reaction, constant proof that you're still part of the tribe. If you don't reply, you must not care. If you don't laugh fast enough, you're cold. If you don't say I'm in right away, you're difficult. But look at what group chats have become. They're not just conversations anymore. They're live stages. They run all day, every day. They never close the curtains. And inside them, there's a quiet expectation that you will always be available, always responsive, always emotionally present on command. A message drops in, and you're supposed to be there. Right now, not later, not when you've rested, not when you've thought. Now. And the weird part is, nobody says that rule out loud, but everyone feels it. Because the moment you don't respond, something subtle happens. The thread moves on without you. The jokes stack up. The plan evolves. The vibe shifts. And then you open your phone and you can feel it. That tiny pressure. That little voice that goes, you should say something. Even if you have nothing to say. Even if you're tired. Even if you're not in the mood to perform a personality. So you type lol. You tap a heart. You send a quick reaction just so people know you exist. And that's the point. In modern messaging, visibility becomes currency, not because it's meaningful, because it's measurable, seen, delivered, active now, typing. We turn connection into a status indicator. And once that happens, replying stops being a simple action. It starts becoming a signal that you're still likable, still included, still paying attention, still safe to keep around. So when someone doesn't reply, it looks like rejection. But what if it's not? What if their silence is actually a filter? Because not every message deserves a piece of you. Not every thread deserves your mood. Not every joke deserves your reaction. Not every plan deserves your immediate yes. There's a difference between being present and being available. And group chats blur that line so perfectly that we forget we're allowed to have one. Think about how people show up in those chats. Some people are always on. They're quick. They're funny. They're consistent. They keep the energy alive like it's their responsibility. They throw in reactions. They reassure. They smooth tension. They respond to everyone. And sometimes they don't even notice they're doing it. Because it feels normal. But it's not neutral. It's emotional labor. It's social management. It's reading the room and staying in the room at the same time. Now compare that to the silent reader. The one who sees everything but doesn't jump in. They're not competing for attention. They're not trying to keep the thread alive. They're not adjusting themselves in real time to match the vibe. They're watching. And people underestimate what that means. Because observation is not nothing. It's attention without performance. It's presence without noise. And in a world that rewards speed, the observer is often the one who sees the truth. They notice the shift when someone's joke lands wrong. They notice the moment the chat turns sharp. They notice who gets ignored. They notice who always has to explain themselves. They notice who's always trying too hard to be liked. They see the emotional weather change before anyone admits it's raining. And that's why their silence isn't always awkwardness. Sometimes it's self-restraint, a kind of mental discipline. Some people have a stronger habit of pausing before they speak. They think before reacting. They don't hand their emotions out just because a notification asked for them. That's introspection. It's the ability to step back and ask, do I really want to add to this? Not should I respond so people don't judge me? But do I actually mean something right now? And that's rare, because group chats are built to reward the opposite. They reward the fast reply, the quick laugh, the instant agreement, the visible participation. They reward the person who is always there. And when you live in that system long enough, you start believing something dangerous. That silence equals absence. That if you're not reacting, you're disappearing. So you stay active. You stay available. You stay on. And after a while, it gets exhausting. That's why, for some people, staying quiet becomes a form of control. Not controlling others. Controlling themselves. Protecting their attention. Protecting their mood. Protecting the parts of them that don't want to be pulled into every little thread. Every little joke. Every little emotional ripple. Because not every space requires your contribution. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is just witness. To read. To understand. To stay aware. Without forcing yourself to perform closeness. And if that hits you a little too hard, it's probably because you know what it feels like to keep up appearances in a chat you don't even enjoy anymore. So when someone chooses silence, it might not be because they're distant. It might be because they're trying to stay clear. And once you see it that way, you start asking a different question. Not what's wrong with them, but what are they protecting? And that's where the real psychology starts. What are they protecting? Because let's be honest, a group chat isn't just a place where information lives anymore. It's a place where identity gets built in public. Every reply you send is doing more than answering a message. It's signaling something. Your humor, your loyalty, your timing, your attitude, your role in the group, even your emotional alignment. You're not just saying lol. You're saying, I'm here with you. You're not just reacting with a heart. You're saying, I approve of this moment. And when you don't reply, it feels like you're refusing to sign your name on the shared reality everyone else is building together. That's why silence looks so loud, because participation has become a kind of social proof. A tiny performance, repeated all day. And once you see that, you start realizing something uncomfortable. A lot of our responsiveness isn't about communication. It's about being perceived. It's about staying visible enough to remain included. You know that feeling when you open the chat and you don't actually have anything to say, but you start scanning the thread anyway. Looking for something you can attach yourself to. A joke you can laugh at. A plan you can pretend you're excited about. A sentence you can echo so it looks like you're engaged. Not because you're fake. Because you're human. Because group spaces subtly train you to believe that silence equals rejection. So your brain goes, quick, say something. Keep your place. And for some people, that constant micro-performing gets exhausting. Not dramatic exhaustion. Quiet exhaustion. The kind that makes you feel like you're always slightly on, even when you're alone. So one day, something shifts. They stop asking, what should I say? And they start asking a different question. Do I need to say anything at all? And that question is freedom, because it breaks the spell. It stops the automatic audition for approval. Silence becomes a way of stepping out of the performance without stepping out of the friendship. And the funny part is, a lot of silent readers aren't less connected. They're more aware. They just don't want to turn connection into constant output. Now here's where it goes deeper. Because silence in a group chat isn't only about avoiding performance. It's also about protecting something personal. There's this idea in psychology that people have a sense of ownership over their inner world. Not just their memories, their reactions, their thoughts. Before they become words, their emotions. Before they become public. And group chats have a way of pulling that inner world outside of you. Fast, you have a feeling. And suddenly it's on a screen. You have an opinion. And suddenly it's something other people can quote, react to, misunderstand, screenshot, take out of context. Your tone becomes a debate. Your silence becomes a story. Your 2-second reply becomes something someone reads at 2i and interprets as passive-aggressive. And once you've been misunderstood a few times, you start realizing how fragile words are in a digital room. So some people hold back, not because they're hiding, because they're guarding ownership. They're keeping their thoughts intact and unedited until they actually want to give them away. Because the moment you post a reaction in a group, it stops being yours. It becomes shared property. Open to judgment, open to jokes, open to someone else deciding what you meant. So the silent reader protects their inner space, like it matters. And maybe that sounds dramatic, but think about it. How many times have you typed something simple, then deleted it? Not because you didn't mean it, because you didn't want it to be interpreted, because you didn't want the chat to have access to that version of you. That's not weakness, that's awareness. And once you understand that, you start seeing their silence less like absence and more like boundaries. Now, there's another layer most people don't notice: the conditioning. Because group chats aren't just social spaces, they're dopamine machines. A notification hits, and your body reacts before your mind does. You feel a little urgency, a little pull. You want to check. You want to see what happened. And if you reply and people react back, there's a reward. A laugh, like a quick reply to your reply. It feels good in a way that's hard to explain because it's so small. But small rewards are the most dangerous ones. They train you quietly. They teach your brain that visibility equals safety, that attention equals belonging, that responding quickly keeps you connected. So you start living on reflex, buzz, check, message, reply, reaction, relief. And that loop becomes normal until you meet someone who doesn't play it, someone who sees the notification and doesn't move, someone who reads everything and doesn't rush to leave a mark. And that's when people get confused, because we assume responsiveness is the same thing as care. But sometimes, responsiveness is just conditioning, and resisting it, that's discipline. It takes self-control to pause when your brain wants to react. It takes emotional independence to not chase the little hit of being acknowledged. It takes an internal kind of stability to be okay with not being seen every day. And a lot of silent readers have that, not because they're better, because they've learned that their attention is expensive. They don't want to spend it on every little thread. They don't want their mood to be dictated by the chat's energy. So their silence becomes a way of saying, I choose when I enter. But, and this matters, silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's protection in a different way, because not everyone stays quiet because they're grounded. Some people stay quiet because they're scared. Not scared of people, scared of being misunderstood, scared of saying the wrong thing and watching the vibe change, scared of being ignored and feeling that little sting. There's a kind of pressure in group spaces that's hard to describe until you've felt it. You become hyper aware of how you're coming across. Is this funny enough? Is this too much? Will they think I'm annoying? Will they think I'm dumb? Will they leave me on read? That's self-presentational pressure. It's the constant sense that you're being evaluated, even in casual spaces. And for some people, that pressure is exhausting. So they choose silence, not because they don't want to connect, but because the cost of being visible feels too high. And here's the paradox. The quietest person in the group chat might have the loudest mind. They might be thinking the most, feeling the most, replaying everything. They're not empty. They're full. They're just careful. And both kinds of silence deserve understanding. The disciplined silence and the anxious silence. Because in both cases, it's not they don't care. It's they're managing something. And once you accept that, you start noticing a final twist. What silence does to connection. Because group chats create a strange illusion. They make it feel like you're close to people because you share a thread. But sometimes that thread replaces real reaching out. You assume you know someone because you see them there. You assume they're fine because they laughed at a meme. You assume you're connected because the chat is active. But when someone goes quiet, something gets exposed. Who actually checks in? Who reaches out directly? Who sends a message that doesn't need an audience? Because silence is a filter. It reveals the difference between constant access and real attention. Some people only connect in public spaces, where it's easy and low risk. Some people connect privately, where it's real. And when a silent reader stays quiet, it doesn't always weaken relationships. Sometimes it strengthens the ones that matter. Because the people who truly care don't need you to perform closeness. They'll feel your presence without forcing your output. They'll understand that being quiet doesn't mean you left. And that's why this isn't just about texting habits. It's about identity. It's about boundaries. It's about attention. It's about what kind of connection you're building in a world that confuses noise with intimacy. And once you see all of that, the silent reader stops looking like a problem. They start looking like a person trying to stay whole in a space that constantly asks you to fragment yourself into replies. So the next time you notice someone in the group chat who never replies, slow down before you write the story about them. Slow down before you assume they're cold, or arrogant, or too good for the chat. Because silence doesn't automatically mean distance. Sometimes it means discernment. Sometimes it means they're present in a quieter way. They saw the messages. They felt the mood. They understood what was happening. They just didn't turn their presence into a performance. And if you are that person, if you're the one who reads everything and rarely speaks, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not ignoring people. You're not disconnected. You're not careless. You're not bad at friendships just because you don't type fast enough to keep up with the noise. You're allowed to be a real person in a space that rewards constant output. You're allowed to choose when you enter. You're allowed to protect your attention. And you're allowed to stop proving that you care by being available 247. Because that's what this really is. A system that quietly teaches us that visibility equals love. That quick replies equal loyalty. That if you don't react, you don't belong. But connection was never meant to be measured in timestamps. It was never meant to be measured in streaks, emojis, or who can stay on the longest. Real connection is who remembers you when you're quiet. Who checks in without an audience. Who feels your presence without demanding proof. So maybe the silent reader isn't missing the point. Maybe they're resisting the part of modern life that turns every relationship into a feed. Maybe they're choosing meaning over noise. And honestly, that's not emptiness. That's home.